Hi everyone, welcome back to CAHS Career Prep, where we talk all about how to get you ready for a career in arts, humanities, and social sciences. I'm Nicole McDavid, and in today's episode, we will be talking all about professionalism in the workplace. And to discuss this topic, we have professional Taylor Jenkins here with us today. Thanks for coming, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Taylor is the program manager of leadership development at Alabama Credit Union, and in this role, she manages the credit union's leadership portfolio, which includes strategic project teams, internship programs, career development courses, and much more. Taylor actively researches and presents on the topic of professionalism to aspiring, emerging, and people leaders to ensure ACU team members thrive in and outside of the workforce. It's great to have you here, Taylor. I'm so excited to talk about this topic, and hopefully we'll be super professional while we're talking about professionalism.
We will do this.
Right? We like sat up
We're
a little
like
bit straighter.
ready.
We're
Yes.
like ready and go. So maybe to start, let's talk a little bit about just kind of professionalism in the workplace. When we think about that idea, kind of no matter what your career is, what are some things that students can think about going into the workforce that they should do to start out with?
Yeah, so when you first think about professionalism, or if you look for the definition of professionalism, it is actually very general. So, professionalism, to be a professional, right? And
Yes.
so that provides a lot of context for people. And so I think different organizations focus on different things, but I like to think about three things when I think about professionalism, unless asked to speak about something else specific. So I think about collaboration and communication. Can you collaborate and communicate with other people? I also think about individual conduct. So who are you as a person? What ethics do you bring in the workplace? And then I also think about attire, right? And so what is the dress code of the organization that you're working in? And then are you working to meet that dress code? And then how do you show up in that way?
Yeah. So what are some advantages for students with being professional in the workplace?
So, just kind of going back to those three main topics that I just covered, if you have great communication skills, if you have the ability to collaborate well with others, then people are probably more likely to put you on high priority projects, right? Because we know that you can start off that initial communication, you can follow up, and then you also execute. And being able to work with a lot of different people who may not be your primary contact outside of work is a skill set within itself. And so, again, the advantage to that is now I can put you on any project because I know that you work well with absolutely any person. And then the attire, I think that anybody in the workforce, they trust consistency, right? And so let's say at Alabama Credit Union, we have a business casual dress code. Well, Taylor always shows up business casual. She makes sure that she's properly groomed. She makes sure that, her clothes are not super wrinkled, that she's not wearing something with a stain on it, that it's not super tattered. And so I can trust that consistency in and outside the workforce. So if I'm having a meeting with a vendor or if we're having an external event, I feel comfortable maybe inviting this person because I know they're going to show up in a professional manner. Whereas somebody who is inconsistent in the way that they show up in that way, somebody may have to think twice about, do I want you to come here because will you represent the credit union well, just in your attire or any other organization, or even as a student in the university that you may be representing. And then I would say another huge advantage is just your individual reputation, right? So reputation is a big piece of being a part of any organization and is kind of tied to networking. If you have a good reputation, you don't always have to self-promote, but other people will promote you because of who you are. And so that's that individual conduct, kind of going back to those ethics and standards. You're going to keep these same morals and values no matter where you go. That's the type of reputation that you have. I can trust you to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And I think it's great the point that you bring up that when you're thinking about attire in the workplace, it doesn't mean that you have to, go out and buy a whole bunch of suits, because somebody can look like a hot mess in a suit.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And so it's a lot about how you're carrying yourself in the items that you're wearing to look professional, that you don't look like, you just kind of rolled out of bed and came to work.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. You definitely don't have to have on the most expensive thing. I think that oftentimes, especially students, they get their first, big kid job or that career jumpstart, and they
Yeah.
kind of want to do a full-on haul. But like you said, you can have the nicest thing, but if it is wrinkled or stained, or we can tell that you didn't brush your hair or wash your hair that morning, then that speaks a lot louder than what you actually have on. Nobody is worried about the brands or the name of whatever it is. Just to show up in a nice clean fashion, ready to work. I think another part about being in the workforce that people don't think about is you don't know who you'll encounter or what project you'll be asked to do that day. And so again, that consistency of whether I'm in my office, kind of doing self-led work, or if I'm teaching a course that day, I always try to be the same person. So if I do need to step out for an interview because they need a panel of people, or if I do need to go run an errand on behalf of the credit union, I'm representing not just myself, but the organization will.
Yes, and I think that's super important. And I tend to dress up for work, maybe even a little bit more than what is typical. But it's always so funny to me because it's always that day that I'm dressed a little bit more casually than I typically am, that somehow I get pulled into a meeting with like the president of the university.
Absolutely.
Like, hey, the president's here. I'm like, great,
Yeah.
I'm wearing jeans today because it's Friday.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah.
okay. But it's one of those situations that it's good to think about and know the role that you're in. I think that's really important. You brought that up. You need to know the organization's culture and what their expectations are, because different companies have different expectations, and even based on your role within the company, there's different expectations. There's some companies where most people wear pants and a polo type style, but then as people get higher up in the organization, they're in a suit coat or something, or a long shift. And so it's important to know that culture and kind of think about how you're fitting within that.
Yeah, and hopefully for the people who are watching this, they're kind of able to learn from our experiences, because I had a similar experience. One of my first positions outside of being member facing, where I worked directly with the members, was training. I would train all of our new hires, and I knew when my training courses were and when they weren't. And so I always dressed up anytime I had a training course. And one day I didn't have a training, and so I thought, I'm not going to wear any makeup. I am not going to really dress up. I'm just going to kind of do a t-shirt, jeans. I kid you not, my entire executive team walked past my office that day and said hey to me. And I thought, they're not going to know who I am. Yeah. I look completely different. I'm a complete different representation of myself than I am in any other day. And so that experience is what taught me, you need to make sure that you're being the same person, that you're showing up the same way, so that people know this is how Taylor will come in a room. In the same way, different roles do kind of have different dress codes. And so it is good to know, get with your supervisor, talk with your peers around you. What is required of this job? What do you guys normally wear? Do you have to run errands often? Do you have to speak to other people? Are you constantly pulled out to do something? Because that can reflect how you're supposed to dress every day.
Yeah, and I think that's great. It's great to, when you're going into an organization, speak to the people that you're working with and ask questions. It's okay to ask, and you kind of can monitor by looking around you and seeing what other people are wearing. I think that's really important to kind of gauge that as you go in for the interview. I always do kind of a scan of that when I'm in an interview. I've been in one in the past. It's been a while, but when I have been in the past, I do kind of look and see, like, what are people wearing to the interview, and when I am walking through a space, like, what are people wearing to this particular office at any certain day, and it gives you an idea of kind of what that expectation may be. And helps you with that as you're deciding what you want to wear day to day. And sometimes they'll lay out that principle for you. I mean, some companies have different policies.
What is everybody else doing? And then also, most handbooks or policy doesn't say every specific thing. So if you have questions about something, whether it is what are you wearing, or just to your actual job duties every single day, go and ask follow-up questions. I think that oftentimes people are afraid to ask clarity questions because they think that somebody may think, oh, they didn't know, or they weren't listening. But I appreciate when anybody asks me questions, because I'm going, they're trying to make sure that they get it right. And then as it relates to attire specifically, if it is questionable, maybe sit that one out that day and then ask the next day. I would not wear it if you think that it is questionable. Ask first and then go, okay, this does work or it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think that's a great piece of advice for students to have, is that you really do want to ask questions and get that information. Don't try to guess it, because you don't have to. There
Yeah.
are people who are willing to help you.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about if you have like a conflict or a communication issue in the workplace. What are some different things that you can do to handle that in a professional manner and keep your professionalism?
Yeah, so first, conflict will happen. It
Yeah,
will
so
happen.
true. Yes.
It will happen. I think oftentimes, just depending on the type of person that you are, you may naturally shy away from conflict, but conflict is normal. It will happen. And conflict does not have to be a high school drama, right? Conflict is simply a disagreement in the workplace. And so anytime you are having conflict, I would say, seek first to understand and then be understood. That's a famous quote. I can't remember who said it. And so it does not belong to me. But what that simply means is, if you are having a disagreement, make sure that you're taking a step back to see, am I truly trying to understand what the person is saying to me? And if I am, but there's still some disagreement, and maybe it is more of a heated situation, you can always ask for a break, right? So as you guys are working and going through your college and getting ready to finish up with your career, recognize that we're adults, and I can say, hey, I need to take a break from this. Can I step away for 10 minutes, or can I get back to you on this tomorrow? It's totally fine to take a break and come back to the conversation. And then let's say that the disagreement continues even after you come back. I would ask for maybe a stakeholder or somebody who has more context on the project that you guys are working on, because maybe that clarity will help you guys come to a resolution. The biggest part with conflict is making sure that you do find a resolution. A lot of times people shy away from it, and so it can become a bigger beast than it was initially. So it's okay to hit it, head on. Hey, we're having a disagreement. I understand that you're saying this, I'm saying this, and then if we don't agree, then we can always bring in a mediator or somebody who has more context, because that could change both of the parties' mind who's having the disagreement.
Yeah, I think that's great. And so kind of along those lines, and I think this does happen quite a bit in workplace situations, if you have more of a like covert type conflict. So let's say, there's some things going back and forth over the company email, or even, I know like a lot of companies use things like Slack or other, intercompany messaging devices. If there's a conflict within that, what is a way to handle that professionally? Should you respond, through written? Should you talk to them face to face? And if you do respond, written or face to face, what should you do?
Yeah, never respond right now. Just joking.
I mean,
but the reality is, and I teach a business writing course at Alabama Credit Union, and one thing that we do first is just identify that everything that we do here is business writing. I think, especially because we have a people first culture, and most companies do, where they care about their team members and the customers that they're serving. It feels so much like family that you don't think about this as like, this is a company. But it's a company. And so we have to make sure that our written communication reflects well of ourselves and the company as a whole, and anything that you write can normally be audited. And so I would not, if you have a conflict and you feel like it is not going a direction where it is, a resolution is coming soon, I would not continue to respond in a written way, just because you don't want that to be audited or to say something that you didn't mean. Or if it was on an email in a courtroom, would you like what you said? The other piece of that is, I think it's always best to pick up the phone and call someone, because you can hear their tone a little bit more. If you can see the person in person, that's great. I know at my organization, we are spread out across the state. We have a ton of employees, and so that's not always possible. But if I feel like somebody may not be understanding me correctly, I like to pick up the phone and call them, because they can hear my tone of voice. I can add a little bit more context. And hopefully I can just clarify the way that they're reading it. And it allows the communication to go a little bit further, to where if I write it, it may take them a minute to read it, and they read it one way and they're already upset and they're responding one way. But if we're on the phone or in person, I feel like, if I say, hey, I really didn't like this, and they respond immediately, then I can almost debunk if it is a myth. No, that's not what I was meaning. I was actually meaning this. Does this make a little bit more sense? And so I think verbal conversations gives more clarity. If you can and feel like it's necessary, pick up the phone.
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice, because we are many times so much kind of thinking, well, I'll just send, a message back. And I'm the same way. I would much rather, if I have a conflict with somebody, I want to talk to them in person about it. I do not want to have to go over text to deal with it, because things do get misconstrued. And people are always going to put more in a text message or in an email than they would actually say in person.
Yeah.
And so I would much rather talk to that person face to face, because I think that it has typically a much better ending to it. And as you said, keeping your emails really professional. I think that's something you can start working on at the college point, if you haven't already, from high school and beyond. When you send an email, you put the person's name, you put information in the subject heading that leads them to that, right? Having that signing your name at the end.
Absolutely. And even if you're good friends with a person, because not only could it be audited or used against you, but that person may need additional clarity from somebody else, and they forward it and it says, "What's up, Nicole?"
Yes,
you good? And so maybe this person who I now don't know has this first impression of me that is not even a true reflection of myself. I've been with my company for 6 years, and so I have some really, really great friends there who I work with on projects. But if I'm writing them about project work, I always go, "Hey, so-and-so, comma, I want to follow up about this meeting that we had." And I always make sure that it's professional, because they may need clarity or have to forward it to somebody else or use it for something else. And so I just want to make sure that I'm coming across clean, not just to that person, but anybody else that I'm working with.
Yes, 100%. And I've had that same situation. One of our former faculty members, several of our former faculty members that we've had in the college that I've been good friends with, we text back and forth all the time, but then our emails that are coming back and forth, like through UAH, they're very formal, because it is something that, like, when we're emailing about that stuff, we don't know if we're going to need to forward it. And so you do want to have that. And also, when somebody's reading that email, let's say, like, if there's some sort of concern or something we need to take to the department chair or the dean, if you don't have the names and stuff in there, at a certain point when you're reading those kind of, you can't remember who said what.
The email is the record that I need to even remind myself of what happened. Anyways, and just kind of on the topic of professionalism, even if you have really great friends at work, it's important to think, work is work, and then friendship is friendship, which that's simple enough and maybe doesn't make a lot of sense. But I may go to lunch with my friends, I may hang out with them after lunch, I may walk past them and have a 5-minute conversation in the hallway, but I try to approach my work as I would with any other team member. I try to be fair, I try to be unbiased, I try to give them the same amount of detail, and I also don't take advantage of my friendships, right? And so because this person is my friend, I'm not going to say, "Hey, I know you have a really crazy day, but I forgot to get this to you." I'm going to treat them as if I would treat any other team member. And I think that's kind of what helps that workplace balance of, we are still really great friends, but you can also trust me as a coworker. If not, you'll have people where love you as a friend, I do not want to work with this person, right? And you don't want that to be you or your friendships.
Yeah, and that is so true. So I think for students who are coming into the kind of that entry level, that first job, what might be some challenges that they face coming in for professionalism that they maybe need to overcome? Are there things that you can maybe think about that might help them, that you maybe have seen in the past with people who are in their maybe early 20s, getting a job for the first time, some different things that they have kind of encountered in different ways that maybe they could be helped with that?
Yeah, so I think one thing is just recognizing that, and I don't know, it sounds a little silly, but you are an adult and you are to be respected as if anybody else would. I know for me, and I've seen this in a lot of other team members, if you go straight from high school into college, you still feel like your college professors have a different level of authority over you, as they do in some ways, and you're just trying to be respectful. But naturally, because especially if you're going into your first job, you feel the same way about your employers or your team members, and you may have the same position or job title as somebody who is 39 years old, but for whatever reason, being so young coming to the workforce, we almost like that person is superior, and so we do a lot of yes ma'am, no ma'am. And for a lot of the young people coming in, they think, I'm just being respectful, but you want to make sure that people are seeing you as an active, tenured employee as if they would anybody else. And so one thing that I did to help clear myself of that is I was intentional about building my reputation to be one, not of the young person in the office who's always playing or goofing around, or, this is the baby of the office. I want people, my executive team, our managers, to see me as if they do everybody else. I don't want to be passed up on opportunities because of misinterpreted immaturity, because that is how I've allowed myself to be played out. Because, I don't know. It's hard to kind of put it into words, but the biggest thing is just knowing, you're a team member just like anybody else there, and you don't have to take on the student role or the child role. You're there, you're employed, you're hired, you're no longer in college.
Yes.
The workforce is to be taken just like anything else.
I think that's great, and it really is speaking to, in a way, like maybe getting over that imposter syndrome that so many people feel when they get that first job. They're just grateful to have that job, and they do feel like coming into the company that they're like maybe not even sure that they should be there, right? And you're concerned about it. But I think that's one of the things that's really important to kind of reset your mindset about it, because everybody was new in the company at some time, unless they created the company. And then, then it was still new because they were creating it.
Yes.
But everybody at some point was hired in. And
Absolutely.
So they all at some point were just starting out. And so when you're starting out in that role, no matter, where other people are within that, you have things to contribute. And I think,
Absolutely.
I have found that in my role, when I started teaching, and I was almost the same age as my students, so which was a long time ago. And now, I'm one of the most senior lecturers, that we have in the college. And so a lot of people that are coming in are younger than I am. And it is something that I always think about, that, everybody that's coming in is coming in with some sort of experience, or they have things to add. And I want to make sure that we are, making sure that they understand that they are valued.
Absolutely.
And I think that's incredibly important in the workplace setting as well. Like, that's part of your professionalism in the workplace.
Absolutely. And to that, just knowing, what do you bring to the table? Identify your strong suits, but also identify, somewhere where you may be weak. The cool thing about students coming into the workforce is you kind of get to take all of that academic knowledge and go, okay, what is that like as a skill set in this particular role? And there are going to be some things where you're like, okay, research, I'm killing it. I did so much research when I was in school. But then there may be another topic or skill set where you don't feel as good about. I would not shy away from that. I would say, okay, I know I'm not doing as strong on this, and so now I'm going to go and ask for help, or look at additional resources to make sure that I'm doing well at this. So just knowing who you are, and what you bring to the table, but also maybe what you're not thriving at, and then working on that as well.
I think that's great. Yeah. Making sure that you kind of assess as you're going, and continue to do that.
Absolutely.
Which, honestly, throughout your whole career, that's the thing that you'll end up doing, whether you think that you're going to or not. That's kind of how it goes.
My supervisor said something similar recently. It was a group, just a really diverse team, as far as everybody was from a different department and brought a different skill set. And she said, we all have one thing in common. We are all still learning. And that is the one job that we all have as any professional, is that we still have to learn. Yep. And so I think sometimes you walk away, from college, you have your degree, and like, I'm done with that. But there is more to know, right? Yep. Because you have a skill set of maybe how to apply some things, but maybe you don't know about this specific system, or maybe they're doing a rollout, or they're changing something. And so there's always an opportunity to learn, and you will always be learning, even if it's not in the classroom setting.
Yeah, I love that, and that is so true. Definitely so true. Was there anything else that you would like to tell students about professional development today?
I would just say that you got it, right? So my role being a program manager over leadership development, I am literally helping team members every single day with professional development, with leadership, and career development, which just means that everybody doesn't walk in knowing how to be a professional on day one. Even as you guys listen to Nicole and myself, we figured some things out based on experience. And so there are some things that you guys will learn in college. There are some natural things that you will just know, maybe because of how you're raised or what people told you when you were younger. But the other pieces you will fill in the gaps on. Imposter syndrome is real. I think it happens at every level, especially as you are promoted and you receive different positions. But chances are there are some resources or tools that your company has to help you. And I know that UAH does. That's one of the reasons why we have this here.
Yes.
And so you're not alone. You got it.
That's amazing. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you so much to Taylor Jenkins for being here today to talk about professionalism in the workplace. We would also like to thank our sponsor, Blue Summit Supplies, for the wonderful facility that we are in and the resources to make this recording possible. A special thank you to our assistant media writer and researcher, Macy Morgan, video producer and editor, Jesse Hendricks, and producer, Grace Trutel. I'm your host, Nicole McDavid, and we'll see you next time for more CAHS Career Prep.